Alright, guys, this is a game I'm very excited to talk about. It's a game that I was incredibly eager to play for many, many years, and just due to a lack of time or a lack of understanding of how to get it working, and also it was in a sort of development hell for a little while. I wasn't able to play it until recently, and recently I just, bit the bullet. I had Thief 2 already installed. I made sure I got a mod manager and I installed Thief 2X Shadows of the Metal Age. Now, I was incredibly excited about the game, but I also had reservations. It's a fan made mod, it's an independently developed project, and it was developed for free. So this wasn't a paid mod. This wasn't by an outside studio. This was just done by a bunch of fans. So, understandably, I was a little bit wary of what the quality of the final product was going to be for a game like this. And through some of the screenshots and stuff, it felt like, okay, are they going to harken back to Thief 1 a little bit more? And it's going to be very focused on battles with the undead and the supernatural. Are the levels just going to be too labyrinthian and too big, or are they going to be too simplistic? How are they going to work with the stealth? So I had reservations, but I was definitely excited to play it because it looked amazing and it looked like it was made by a really passionate group of people. And so I got to play this fantastic game recently, and I have to preface it with this. This is a fantastic mod. It's a fantastic game, and I think that it carries forth with the mentality and the spirit of what Looking Glass put into the Thief games. This is definitely a mod. I wouldn't even call it a mod. It's a full game that had the same heart and philosophy put to use by fans who really understood the franchise. So let's get into it. I'm going to talk about basically just my thoughts on the game as I was playing it. I wrote down some notes here. I'm going to share them with you. Here's a little bit of the backstory. So Thief 2X it's a tangential storyline to the Metal Age. In fact, it's almost a prequel to some of the events of Thief 2 the Metal Age. And it's also tangential because the main characters involved have nothing to do with Garrett, especially at this point in time. Some of the villains that come up in the game do later have something to do with Garrett, but throughout the main campaign, the protagonists and most of the antagonists have nothing to do with Garrett. They have nothing to do with the Keepers. The Keepers aren't even mentioned. But it does take place, for the most part, in the city, and it involves the rise of the Mechanist Order. But what I really appreciated about the story was it wasn't some sort of prequel about Karis's rise to power and this, that, and the other thing. The Mechanists are just there. You view as a fly on the wall some of the things that are happening in the Hammer Order and in the city that are bringing the Mechanists through the ranks and into power in the city. But it's not the main crux of the plot, and you're not there to stop them. You're not there to foil their plans. You're not there to discover what Karis's evil plot might be or what the Mechanists are really about. They just exist. But, through the world building of the game, when you read notes, when you read people's diaries, when you come into contact, you don't talk to too many people, but let's say you come into contact with certain characters, you get a sense of the politics surrounding the Mechanist Order in their infancy, and on their rise to power through the ranks of the Hammerite Order. So you play as Zaya. Let me just check that real quick. Yeah, you play as Zaya. One of the other things I really love about this game is that, as a sort of big fan of the series, I've always sort of wanted to see some fan fiction or some lore that talks about what's outside of the city, and especially since we see such unique architecture in places like the sunken city beneath the city itself, and we know that the entire world isn't some sort of Western European inspired medieval place. We know that there's other places in the world. There's made brief mention to in the other Thief games. So Zaya actually comes from what seems to be some sort of North African, Middle Eastern inspired country with a heavy, what we might call Egyptian influences. But as we know, this doesn't really take place on our own universe. So just aesthetically very heavily Egyptian. In fact, Zaya herself has facial tattoos and a complexion that's very reminiscent of what we might think of as Egyptian. And I always thought that was cool. And what really spoke to me was that when I was thinking about expanding the lore of, like, okay, what lies outside of the city in Thief, I was thinking, yeah, some really exotic locales. We could have some sort of Persian or Middle Eastern inspired city with similar technology. So right off the bat, I was totally intrigued because I was like, yeah, that, to me, I'd like to see that in the Thief universe to some extent. That would be very cool. So you play as Zaya. She is a merchant captain. Her family owns a shipping company, and she has agreed to, or she has trained and is now ready to captain her first voyage to the city, the infamous city, to sell their wares and bring the profit home. Her brother has already set up a sort of an import-export company at the docks, and so he will meet your ship at the docks and take your cargo and sell it, and he's asked you to bring a couple specialty items. The game starts with Zaya getting off the boat, taking some of the items to her brother's office at the city docks, and then they begin strolling through the city streets to your brother, whose name is Kadar, to your brother Kadar's house. However, along the way, Kadar and you are mugged in the streets by people who seem to know him. He's killed, and you are chased through the city streets by armed thugs. You, of course, are unarmed. You don't use a lot of stealth in this section. It's just pure running through the city streets. You take refuge in a haunted house, and the thugs dare not cross the threshold because of the horrible tales that have been told about the house. Anyways, you read some diaries in the house, you see some ghosts, and you find a secret entrance in the garden that leads you through a heavily booby-trapped crypt where you meet an old pagan. This old pagan takes you in, and over the next year, he trains you in the ways of being stealthy, in the ways of being a thief. He seems to think the best way for you to figure out who killed your brother and how to get back at them is to use stealth and subterfuge to infiltrate their hideouts, find out whatever you can about them, and set up a sting or kill them yourself stealthily. So Zaya doesn't really start out as a thief per se, but she's definitely trained in similar arts that Garrett is. In fact, one of my big criticisms of the franchise since I've been playing it is it's almost like the game should be called Spy, because most of the jobs Garrett is given in Thief 1 and 2, and to some extent 3 as well, is to go basically perform spycraft. He's not tasked very often with going to steal precious relics. I mean, he is usually in the beginning of each game, but beyond that, it's like, no, we need you to steal recording, or we need you to plant evidence, or we need you to listen to a conversation, or we need you to track these people. Thief 1, I guess, had a little bit more stealing, but it wasn't like theft. It wasn't like heists like you would think, like breaking into a museum and stealing, precious, vase or painting or something. It's like going to the haunted crypt. It's surrounded by zombies. So the stealth is against supernatural undead. It's not against, guards. So, yeah, it's a mild criticism. I don't hate the games for it or anything like that. I think it's totally fine. I just, sometimes it does feel more like you're playing Spy rather than Thief. And so Zaya's campaign is sort of similar. Typically what you'll be doing is spying on people, gathering evidence. So you're there to steal a letter or a ledger or an artifact that you're going to later use to go plant on someone and get them framed for stealing or framed for betrayal or something. So yeah, that's how Zaya's campaign works. And so it starts off after the introductory mission where you meet the old pagan in the haunted crypt. He trains you how to be a stealthy thief, and he sets you loose on the city to find out what happened to your brother and bring his murderers to justice. So one thing I have to say right off the bat about Thief 2X is that the level design, I was a little worried, like I said, that it was going to be very samey and lots of like haunted crypts and just tons of zombies and stuff. But it is an incredibly varied, incredibly unique and interesting set of levels in this game. I mean, there's just so much variety and so many really like interesting locales. Like your first mission, I think, is a great mission. It's a mission where you break into a museum you've learned from your mentor, your pagan mentor, that there's something going on with the curator of this museum and the people who may or may not have killed your brother. So you go in to investigate. And what I like about it is it actually starts you on the rooftop, so you can actually gain rooftop access, or you can go in through the front door. Another level has you starting off in a Mechanist train station, so like this Victorian-style train station that you'd see in like the late 1800s in London or something like that, and then actually sneaking on board a train that, much like the submarine in Thief 2: The Metal Age, is totally decked out in Art Deco fashion, complete with a dance party at the back of the train. And what I really liked about this level, and what added to sort of the immersive sim feel of the world, is that, and actually a lot of the gameplay is like this. You can play a lot of the game like this. You're not Garrett. You're not a master thief whose face is posted all over town on wanted posters. You don't have a huge bounty put out by the City Watch. Nothing like that. You're an unknown. You're just some girl, right? So you're a civilian. And unless people, in many areas of the game, unless you're not supposed to be there, or people catch you doing something you shouldn't be doing, like killing someone or stealing shit, you can just walk through many parts of the game unscathed, which is kind of novel for the Thief series. Actually realized only recently quite a bit of Thief 3 can be played like this, especially out in the city. Civilians don't care about Garrett, but the guards do. First couple times I played it, I didn't know that. I honestly thought that everyone would just attack you on sight. No, Zaya, so one of the interesting things about being on the train is, that little funny dance party I told you about. You can actually partake in that, and it doesn't count against your stealth, and you're not going to get found out. In fact, you can even walk in front of guards on the train. Again, like I said, the only thing you need to not be caught doing is being places you shouldn't and stealing from people. But unfortunately, since you need gold for the next mission, not unfortunately, but because you need gold for the next mission, you're going to have to figure out how to steal from people without being seen. So there's that great bit, and I'll get into something else about the train mission later. And then there's a level in a haunted Hammerite graveyard that's very much like the Horn of Quintus, but like 211. I mean, there's so many zombies, and it's pretty damn hard. There's another level where you go to this like Santa's village type town in the middle of winter, and you have to track these people through the ice. And then you go back to their pirate fortress that you have to swim into to sneak into, and there's all sorts of entry points and exit points, and then you just have to grab somebody's diary to figure out the next move. Trying to think of you break into this old hospital in the walled off portion of the city where I believe a necromancer started raising hordes of the undead, and the Hammerites were there to stop him. So it's just totally cursed and totally creepy and totally crawling with the undead, and I don't like the undead in the Thief games necessarily. They're not my favorite part, but because they're used so sparingly in Thief 2X, they're kind of like a welcome break to the normal flow of the game. There's a fantastic level that sort of harkens back to, what's that level in Thief 2? There's a big mansion that you have to go through. I believe it's a hotel or something. But yeah, there's a big hotel or mansion or something in Thief 2 that you have to go through and steal a bunch of stuff. Man, I can't believe I don't remember it. Or maybe I'm thinking of this game. But anyways, this game has a fantastic level where you break into like a very ritzy hotel. It's just like, again, the environments are so varied. You have you're like an entire mission on a train while it's moving, a mission in a haunted, abandoned ancient graveyard, a mission in the ritziest hotel in the city. There's another mission in a city where you have to get into your brother's old workshop, and there's just tons of verticality and hidden spots and hidden secrets, and so it's just really, really well thought out and laid out, and just a really great thief level. And and then you actually go to the city of Dayport, which is sort of a suburb of the city. It's a little bit of a ways away, and there's so many missions there that you begin to actually kind of memorize the streets and memorize routes. And it's a little bit different every time, because sometimes it's snowed in, so certain things are blocked off, and other times it's nighttime. And then you break into this Hammerite Cathedral twice, but each time you go further and further into the thing, sort of hearkening back to the Casing the Joint mission in Thief 2, and then, of course, Masks, the mission after that. So just a ton of variety of the level design. Each level is really fantastic, and this is the other thing I really have to hand to the developers. If someone told me that this was not a fan-made mod, so if it had higher quality FMVs and a little bit better sound design, and someone told me that Looking Glass made this as a sort of expansion pack to Thief 2, and it just never got released, and one of the developers put it up on some mod site, I would absolutely believe them. The quality of level design is absolutely up there with Looking Glass. There's a million different ways to tackle each obstacle. There's a million different ways through the environment to get to where you need to go. Like on the train, like I was saying, how do you break into people's compartments without being seen? Well, you can wait till the guard turns his back and pick the lock really quick and get in there and hope that the person doesn't wake up. Or you can jump over the railing of the train, and there's steam pipes that are used to heat each compartment of the train that you can actually kind of carefully clamber on as you move on the outside of the train while it's moving. And then you can go in through the window. Or you can go on the roof and break in through the skylight. Things like that. And another thing that was really, really great that I really just have to hand it to, I cannot say again, the level you break into your brother's workshop, there's just so much. You can get in through the ground floor, you can get in through the window using rope arrows and staying on the rooftops. It is such open-ended level design. Each level almost feels like an extension of the Thieves Highway level from the Metal Age, where you can go in any direction you want and find some unique new thing. So you're either going to find a hidden area or a better way to traverse around the level, or another way around some of the harder obstacles. So they really, really did a fantastic job of making these levels huge and open-ended and complex, like a Looking Glass level. So really kudos to them for doing that. In addition to that, they have a new sort of tool set of weapons. Zaya does not use a blackjack. She uses a hammer, but it functions like the blackjack, so who cares? She has a sword, which, again, functions the same way. Looks pretty cool, but it functions the same way. But the pagan priest who takes her in actually gives her an elemental crystal, and what this does is when you activate it, it changes the properties of all your elemental arrows. So, for example, a water arrow now becomes an ice arrow. And this is great for this sort of... It really expands on... Thief sometimes seems to sort of border, the definition of an immersive sim. Because while it's incredibly immersive in a highly simulated environment and everything like that, sort of the lack... it's not like Deus Ex where, you have tons of tools always at your disposal and stuff like that. I'm not saying it's not. It definitely is. But I could definitely see how some people might be like, well, it's not the most complex of the ones out there, when you compare it to System Shock 2 or Deus Ex. And, the tool set has kind of been your way to sort of play with the environment. And so by expanding the tool set in this mod to, you know, double the function of every arrow you have was really brilliant. And so, for example, water arrows become ice arrows. Well, what they'll usually have is little obstacles where, you know, you can swim across a chasm, but it's the ledge on the other side is too high for you to climb up while swimming. So what you'll do is you'll switch to an ice arrow and shoot the water and create a temporary little jumping pad for you to hit and then jump, and then you can mantle over to the other side. Fire arrows become flame or flare arrows, which if you shoot instead of shooting one fire arrow at an undead and it blows them up, if there's many undead after you, you can shoot a flare arrow at the floor and it will blind and injure every undead within a certain radius. You know, it also blind guards, so you can sort of use it like a flashbang, except it blinds them for longer. Oh man, I forget what the moss arrows do. I wish I remembered that. That would have been great. But yeah, the moss arrows and the noisemakers do something different too. So I think even the broadhead. Oh no, the rope arrows. Crap. Trying to remember. Oh, I think it turns them into vine arrows. I may be wrong, but I think it turns them into vine arrows. But you know, that can be helpful because vine arrows can be used in more places than rope arrows. So you can turn your vine arrows into rope arrows, or I mean, the other way around. So. Yeah, that was really, really fantastic. The whole, like I said, the whole game really feels like an extension of Looking Glass. Even the soundscapes for most of the game, I mean, they're not up to the level of Eric Brocious, but I mean, the guy's like a fucking genius, you know? I mean, I've never heard haunting soundscapes and sound design and the cool things that he did for the Thief franchise. I've never heard anything like it in any other game. So Thief 2X, while not having him on board, obviously, they did a really, really great job of emulating his work. Must be said it's not up to the same quality, of course, but they did a really fantastic job emulating his work. And so even some of the soundtrack bits, like the little musical stings and the atmospheric, you know, moans and groans of each level do harken back to what Looking Glass put out in the Thief series. So that, again, has to be said. Oh, another thing that I was really surprised at was that all of the NPCs have very good voice acting and dialogue. You know, sometimes their dialogue will be, well, much like in a lot of the other Thief games and Looking Glass games, their dialogue will be relevant to problem solving in the level. You can even interact with some of them, which is kind of not a first for the Thief series, but, you know, you can do it a lot more in this one. You know, I think there's even one point where you can talk to a lady and her son gets annoyed, and so, or not annoyed, but he gets excited or something, and then a guard comes by, and then the little boy wants to talk to the guard, and then the guard will get distracted, you know, showing off his sword or whatever to the little boy, and so you can use that as a distraction to get by, you know. And there's no like dialogue trees or anything, but yeah, you can absolutely sort of interact with the people in the world. And, you know, again, for a fan-made mod, everyone's incredibly well voice acted, and there's lots of great dialogue in the game. So again, that has to be said. The story is fantastic as well. It's in the vein of Thief, very dark, very tragic in places. It's a very sort of cold, cruel, unfeeling, uncaring, dispassionate world. So that definitely comes through. And like I said before, it involves a lot of people from that will become relevant in Thief 2, and you sort of see their rise to power, and you see how Karis has influenced them, but it's not part of the main plot. Zaya's story is fantastic and heartbreaking all at the same time. And then there's some twists near the end that are really, really great. So I think it just worked very well. The story, yeah, I thought it was fantastic, and I didn't have any issues with it. And it didn't seem like contrived or derivative or cliche. It just, everything worked. It wasn't the greatest story ever told, of course. I'm not saying this is like the number one story in a video game, but it was absolutely fantastic. And I think, once again, the mod team deserves props. Yeah, I sort of touched on this earlier. The campaign is like a nice, even mix of Thief 1 and Thief 2. There are the large missions with tons of supernatural elements and undead to kill, and just different types of enemies and a totally different approach to the level, where, so, sometimes you actually do have to take a more offensive approach sometimes. At least that's how I play it. When I play against the undead, I do feel I have to get a little bit more offensive because it's a little bit harder to sneak around them. One thing I really, really liked that they implemented was location-based damage, especially on zombies. All right? So one of the things I always hated about fighting the undead, in especially Thief 1, you don't really ever have to fight them in Thief 2. They're present, but you don't actually have to fight them. But in Thief 1, I hated that you always had a limited supply of ammunition against them. After a certain point, you couldn't do anything. Even if you use your sword, you'd down them for, 5 seconds, and they get right back up. And sometimes when you just need to clear them away from an obstacle, or when you just want to explore to get all the loot, it can be kind of frustrating. In Thief 2X, what they've added is location-based damage. So what you can do, the zombies are helpless without either A, both their arms, or B, their heads. So one thing that you can do is, if you're careful with where you're swinging, you can actually chop off both their arms, and then they can't do anything to you. And they'll just follow you around, but they can't actually inflict any damage. Or you can chop off their heads and kill them immediately. Which is much harder to pull off, because I do think it's sort of randomized. I tried really localizing my strikes to the face, and it was very hard to dismember the head sometimes. It was actually way easier to take the arms off. So there was one level where I had, 5 or 6 or 7 zombies following me around. But I just thought it was cool, again, adding to, you want to make it sort of like an immersive sim. Let's just add more complexity to how combat works, Yeah, the zombies are unkillable with conventional weapons, but if you take off all their, if you remove any appendage that can harm you, who cares? They're not going to do anything to you except creep you out and follow you. So that was really, really great. I have a note here that says I already said this, but once again, the hotel and train missions are, to me, the standouts of the game. Those were the most fun, the most interesting, the most intricate, complex, with a really high, healthy degree of challenge, and also just really inventive locations in this game. I also have to say that they really did a lot, as much as they could, to take the Thief 2 version of the Dark Engine and just push it to its limits. It's for the engine. Keep that in mind. For the engine. It's got absolutely beautiful texture work, beautiful modeling, probably the highest geometrical detail we've seen in a Thief 2 map, and just excellent lighting, great use of color and lighting, and making things look dramatic and moody, but also functional to the gameplay with properly placed shadows and stuff so that you can actually sneak around. So shout out to the lighting. Great pacing too. Levels will have, large swells in difficulty and then let you off for a bit, and then swell in difficulty again and let you off for a bit, and then some levels will be very easy and fun, and you can just kind of like, not too easy, but easy enough, like, again, taking a break from things like the undead missions, where you're constantly low on health and you're constantly being chased by unstoppable enemies, to more conventional enemies that can be knocked out with a blackjack and just thrown in a pit somewhere. Then you just run by and, or distracted with a noisemaker. So yeah, they really know how to pace out the levels to be like, all right, now this is going to be really challenging, but it's not like the next one's going to be 2 times or 3 times or 4 times more challenging, it's like the next one's going to take it down a notch and then we'll bring it back. So the pacing and the difficulty curve were fantastic for this game. It didn't feel too long and it didn't feel too short either in terms of length. I thought there was 1.5 daytime missions in this game, and that was just kind of a welcome. I know it sounds stupid, but just the novelty of playing a stealth game with daytime missions. I loved Splinter Cell Double Agent. The story was all right. It was pretty good, actually, but there were certain things about it that just didn't work for me. Like all the Double Agent stuff I felt like it kind of interrupted the gameplay in Splinter Cell Double Agent. One thing I really loved about the game was if they just made like a map pack where you didn't have to do any of the Double Agent shit, and they're just like, all right, yeah, just blast through the missions. That would be fantastic, because the missions in that game were phenomenal, and they had tons of daytime missions. Daytime mission in the Arctic, daytime mission in some war-torn African nation, daytime mission on a fucking cruise ship in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, and the locations were just so interesting, and there was such variety to all the level design. It was so beautiful to look at and beautiful to play, and here's the thing too, they didn't change much from the gameplay of Chaos Theory. I think they did change the sound meter. That was a big loss, which is why I still think Chaos Theory is the superior game. But in terms of like level design and just like aesthetically, like enjoying like a cool environment and like cool things to see and look at and do, yeah, Double Agent takes the cake. And so I always loved that they added daytime missions to a Splinter Cell game, and they did that in this too. There's one and a half. One is like sort of daytime, but there's like a huge blizzard. The other one is absolutely like in the middle of the afternoon. The Hammerites raid this place, and you kind of sneak in after them to like, pick off the stragglers from the aftermath. And it was just cool. And I was just like, oh yeah, Thief game. Well, I guess Thief 1 sort of had a daytime mission. The second mission in the game, yeah, that's daytime. But you're in the dark for so much of that one, it doesn't really feel like it. But this one is pretty much all in the daylight, so I thought that was very cool. Oh, here's another thing that was another unique, interesting addition. They mix both combative and non-combative guards into the map of Dayport and other parts of the city. Again, since you're not some wanted criminal that's renowned and highly sought after for the bounty, nobody's gonna arrest you on the street. There's no curfew or anything. People just leave you alone unless they see you committing a crime. There's a group of gangsters that eventually find out you're after them, and if they see you on the street, they will not hesitate to kill you. No, I thought it was another great unique mechanic to have non-combative guards. And here's another great thing. I believe you can do this. I tried it, and it seemed to work, but maybe I'm misremembering, so take this with a grain of salt. But I believe you can aggro the gangsters and get them to follow you, and since they're waving swords around, you can actually get them to fight the city watch in Dayport and other parts of the city. So, and I almost definitely remember doing that with the Hammerites. I led them towards a Hammerite cathedral one time, and they killed them on sight there. The Hammers will always kill you on sight, by the way. But, again, adding more depth and interesting stuff that you can do in the gameplay to get enemies to fight each other was just really, really great. And it was also just interesting to play a Thief game where not every single guard is out to kill you. And especially on the train mission, like if you just want to walk from one end of the train to the other to finish the mission, you can kind of do that. You're going to miss out on a ton of loot because the next mission is like really hard. The next couple missions are really hard. So you're gonna want the loot to buy all the equipment. But if you really want to, you can just walk from one end of the train to the other and finish the mission. And having the ability to do that in a Thief game is, again, kind of novel and cool, Oh, and there's this other great mission. Oh my God, in this brothel. It's just, and again, the world building. Like you break into one girl's room and she's murdered, and it's not part of the map. It's not part of the quest. Oh, and there's a way to get a key by making one of the animals outside poop because someone accidentally fed it to him. And I think you could give him laxatives, so you can scare him or something, and he'll poop it out. And there's a million different ways into this brothel. You can even go halfway across the city and climb into the sewers and find this like really convoluted way in. There's so many ways in, and then it's just this huge, awesome level with so much depth, so many things to do. Oh, and the other cool thing about them is they have these themed rooms. So they have like a room themed for the gorilla people from the pagan village, and it's like all bamboo and stuff. So when they want to go visit the ladies there, they have a special room for that, and they have one that's like for clergy members who are into like, I don't know, S&M religious stuff. It's all like a Hammerite cathedral, and there's like whips and stuff. And you know, I'm not trying to be gross or anything. I just thought it was really, really cool to be, you know, it looks like just, you think every room's going to be the same from the outside, but then you go in and they took the time to have all these like interesting, like themed rooms and all this cool stuff to find there. Like I said, you find a corpse of this girl, and if you don't pay attention, you may never know what happens to her, you know? Because it's not really your concern in terms of your objectives. I mean, there's ways to find out what happened to her, and I think possibly even bring her to justice, or bring the killer to justice. But again, you know, it's just great world building, and it, again, that's something you feel like you would see in a Looking Glass game, and this was not made by them. But these people are diehard fans, so they just get it. Exploration is heavily rewarded. I've sort of touched on that with all the other things I've said, but it was a note here, you know, it bears repeating. Yeah, I already talked about the extra gadgets and tools that are available. Oh, there's one other thing. Oh, God, what is it? Oh, you get EMP grenades in this game. So, yeah, that's why. So I made a note for myself that said, think expansion pack for Thief 2. Yeah, so if you were to think of like, all right, what would we see in like a typical 90s expansion pack if they were to make an expansion pack for Thief 2? Well, one of the most annoying enemies to take out in the game are the robots. Now, once you get really good, it's not that bad, because you just stock up on water arrows and just wait for them to turn around. But then you've got things like the cannons and the cameras that can only be disabled from the switch on the wall. Now, what this game was very smart to do was introduce EMP grenades to the game. So what this means, they're fairly expensive in terms of resource costs. You don't find tons of them in the levels. You will need to save them for special instances. But what you do basically is cameras, cannons, walking Keras robots, whatever. You throw it, it disables it. It's fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic. Because it just gives you that extra, you know, sometimes in the previous games, you know, I especially remember, I think it's the last mission of Thief 2, getting a little bit frustrated. There's a room that has like a bunch of conveyor belts where they're manufacturing like weapons and stuff, but there's these sentry crossbow turrets everywhere, and you just have to run your ass off through the entire friggin' thing. And you're just like, man, you know, if you have some fiber arrows, you can take out a couple of them, but like, you know, can't really hoard that many fire arrows. And since your inventory doesn't carry over level to level, you've probably invested in making sure you have some water arrows and some other stuff. So by the time you get to that room, you're pretty much, you know, picked queen of your gadgets. And so, yeah, you just have to use your wits and just run through it, which was a great tense moment, and it required me to get really inventive. But at the same time, it's nice to have that little freebie gadget, you know. It's kind of like the gas grenades in Thief 3, although those were a little bit overpowered because the resource cost is pretty low, and you can really stock up on those. So those get a little game breaking, but these were fine. And I thought it was a welcome addition to the game, especially for cameras and turrets that you just... Because some cameras don't even have a shut-off switch. You know, that was another frustrating thing about Thief 2, which for me broke immersion a little bit, because it's like, you know what? I feel like if I was a good enough thief, I'd be able to find some way to disable this. I see where the wire is going. I know that I can't find the switch. There may not even be a switch, but I should be able to disable it somehow, you know, stealthily. So this is really nice, having the EMP grenades. So yeah, like I said, doubling up the function of your elemental arrows, EMP grenades, things like that really add to making the game feel like an expansion, like there's tons of new content and new possibilities. Yeah, experimentation is heavily rewarded. I was reminded of a lot of the mantra behind uh, Underworld Ascendant when I was playing this game, because I had a zombie coming at me, and I had a bunch of ice arrows. I mean, I had a bunch of water arrows, but I'd used my elemental crystal. So I had a bunch of ice arrows, and I said, okay, what should I do? So I shot one of the zombies with an ice arrow, and he froze in place, and I realized, oh, that's awesome, because now it gives me an opportunity to go inflict a bunch of damage while he can't hurt me, because trying to take off their arms, while they're attacking you, you lose tons of health. So, you wouldn't, it was very clear when they put the ice arrows in the spot in the game where they're like, hey, you get this elemental crystal, try it out. It was very clear that they wanted you to use it for things like crossing gaps in water, make a little bridge for yourself. But just the fact that they thought that extra mile to say, like, no, you can freeze your enemies with this and do all sorts of cool stuff was fantastic. I thought it was really, really great. Again, if Looking Glass had made this game, they definitely would have tried to put that feature in. Had they put in ice arrows or something like that. So, again, these fans really get it. And yeah, experimentation in combat is rewarded. I mean, just the fact that I was like, well, fuck it, I'm going to use my sword against a zombie. Let's see what happens. And they're like, yeah, that'll work in this one, because you can take off their arms. I think you can even take off their legs and just make them like a torso on the ground. Shooting them with ice arrows and disabling them and all, stuff like that. So it really encourages you to experiment and play with all of the tools at your disposal to try and figure out, okay, will this work? Will this not? And with a quick save and quick load feature, why not just go nuts and just play with everything and see what works? I don't know why I wrote this. I guess it was that big of an issue. I did notice that there was no healing items whatsoever in the zombie levels. And of all the levels if you're going through a mansion or like a museum or something like that, the guards are way easier to get past than the zombies. And knock out and deal with. And if you want to knock out every single person in the level so you can loot the place blind, it's not the hardest thing in the world. But against the zombies, you can't knock them out. So if you want to neutralize them, you always have to take them out head on. Meanwhile, in the museum level, there's food, health potions, healing items everywhere. In the zombie levels, I never found one healing potion. The food is all rotted because these places are ancient, so you're not going to find any food. So yeah, that was a little frustrating. I thought that was kind of bad level design. I mean, in terms of the lore of the level in the world, I guess that makes sense, but yeah, it was a little frustrating. I don't even think that needed to be said, actually. That's just a nitpick. Already said that. Yeah, and I already said this too. It's got great connections to Thief 2, the plot of Thief 2, the setup for Thief 2, while also maintaining an original story. It does its own thing. Yeah, guys, I gotta say, Thief 2X, Shadows of the Metal Age, is a fantastic game. It was like a breath of fresh air, because I've played all the Thief games to death, and it was, I'd say, just as good as the Thief games. Yeah, I'd say just as good. Not as good as Thief 2, probably better than Thief 3, definitely better than Thief 1. I know it's sort of a controversial opinion, but there's a lot of overly combative arenas, let's call them, in Thief 1, where you feel like you're sort of forced into combat. And it's, yeah, Thief 1, a lot of people have said this, and I think it's a fair criticism. It didn't really know that it wanted to be a 100% stealth game yet. There's some absolutely fantastic missions in Thief 1 that are stand out, and some of my favorites in the series. I love Constantine's Mansion both times you go. If you go twice, do you go twice or just once? Well, whatever. I love Constantine's Mansion. It's a fantastic, really wacky, kooky, especially in the gold version, where there's that room where everything gets really tiny, and then you go into the next room and everything gets huge, and you have to use rope arrows to get down off this table. So yeah, but overall, yeah, Thief 1 suffered from, like, okay, we're going to tons of zombies, tons of dinosaurs, tons of whatever in this level, and it just got too much, you know? It didn't really become stealth more. It's just like I have to get the fuck away from all these things that are chasing me, that I can't knock out. Whereas Thief 2 is much better about that. So that's the only reason why I put it lower. I love and it must be said that a lot of the lore for the Thief series comes from Thief 1. So it's a must play. It's not a bad game at all. But yeah, it's still not my favorite in the series. I don't even consider Thief 2014 part of the series, so that's why I consider it Thief 1 my least favorite in the series. But no, yeah, this is a fantastic game. Really, really fantastic. If you liked Thief 2, you absolutely owe it to yourself to get this game. And I also have to say, you know, really a shout out to the developers. They did great work on this game. There was a lot of love that went into this, and they just did an absolutely fantastic job. As I said before, if I was not told that Looking Glass didn't make this, it would be very hard to convince me otherwise, you know, if I was not previously told. I would definitely play this game with the conception of like, oh, it was like a lower budget project, you know, because like the FMVs are of lower quality and things like that. I don't know, so like, oh, it was, yeah, something they had to ship quickly, but yeah, it totally feels like they worked on this. Yeah, the developers really deserve kudos. I wish that they had some sort of posthumous, I mean, not that they're dead, but that their team is no longer, a thing. They've disbanded. But I wish they had some sort of posthumous Patreon or something, so that they could get a little love from this project. You know, I wouldn't mind saying, hey, you know, I felt like this game was worth $30 or $40. I'd like you guys to have that, because you did such fantastic work, and I know you did it all for free, out of the just the love of the game and the goodness of your hearts. You did it all. So I'd love to show you some appreciation by paying for my copy, you know. So I wish they had something like that going. They don't. But please, yeah, check them out. I'm going to try and include links to everything related to the mod, how to get it installed, their website. And also, I believe, I don't know if it's on YouTube or if it's MP4 you have to download from their website, but if you're really curious about everything that went into the game, they have a fantastic full play through the game where it's just commentary from the main heads of the development team. So they'll walk through each portion of the game and talk about why they made these decisions and what obstacles they had to overcome. What I found fascinating was that the Thief 2 engine, the Dark engine, absolutely did not want to play with a train running on the tracks like that. It was really freaking out. And so basically what they have to do is use a bunch of visual trickery to make it look like everything's moving, but in fact this train is just stationary, because the physics of the game were freaking out having the train moving, and it was unplayable. So stuff like that. So if you're interested in what went into this game and the development process, please check that out. They have a full commentary. I was a little upset to hear that they didn't like the Art Deco inclusions in Thief 2. They put them in just to have visual consistency between the two games. But they were like, yeah, we always hated the Art Deco. And I cringed a little bit because I've always loved that they put Art Deco in Thief 2. I thought it was just so off the wall and incongruous, but at the same time they made it work. And that's one of the things I love about the Thief universe. Nothing should fit together, but it does somehow. There's a visual consistency that works. So yeah, guys, please check out Thief 2X, The Metal Age. Download it. Like I said, link in the description. Play it, and in the comments section, let me know what you thought of the game. And if you can find the developers and whatever, or just give them a shout out if you can or something. Just let them know you appreciate their work, because I certainly do. All right. Take care.